Joining me next is Dr. Raymond Cloyd, who is an entomologist for Kansas State University. And Dr. Cloyd, you were here at the Sedan Floral workshop field day to share with us about pest resistance. And our viewers would love to hear more, I'm sure, about this. Can we first talk about what is resistance?
Yes, that's a good question. Resistance is a genetic composition change in a population. Resistance is population-based. And that is basically that when you follow the label rate, you're not getting substantial management of the pest population below plant damaging levels.
Okay, and so how does that resistance develop in that pest population?
Well, that's a very complex question, but it's basically the overuse or the continued use of the same mode of action over and over again. And what that does, it puts a selection pressure on the populations where you're killing all the susceptibles, leaving the resistant individuals. They then breed, and now you've got a higher proportion, frequency number of resistant individuals in the population. And that can occur over one or two applications or over several generations.
Okay, and does this kind of vary depending on whether a pest maybe is more isolated versus one that maybe flies in and that sort of stuff to kind of intermingle that population?
Yeah, what we see is that if a pest population is mobile, has winged individuals, then there's a prospect of immigration of individuals. They will breed with the resistant individuals, either dilute resistance or delay the development. However, like spider mites, for example, when they don't fly, then basically there is no immigration, and that leads to a higher frequency or proportion of resistant individuals that stay that way. And those are the populations very difficult to manage with in this case, miticides.
Okay, so what as homeowners can we do in case that resistance is developing?
Okay, once the resistance develops, which you really can't check, the key is using different materials with different modes of action.
Okay.
So you don't want to use the same mode of action like 3 times in a row, once a week, because that puts the selection pressure on the populations, and that promotes the development of resistance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So make sure we're kind of changing it up and maybe hitting different populations and stuff.
Well, what you're trying to do is you want to use the same mode of action within a life cycle.
Okay.
Generation,
okay.
like about 2 weeks. That'll shorten in the summertime.
Okay.
And then for the next generation, use a different mode of action.
Okay.
So you're trying to throw the insect populations or mite off balance, so that the selection pressure for this mode of action is basically gone when you do another one.
For the next generation.
Right. And
okay.
then because you're putting less selection pressure on the previous populations, there's a prospect that those populations will now be more susceptible, there may be more migration, or they may revert back to resistance from that one mode of action that's used previously.
So obviously pest resistance is a concern, but there are sometimes other reasons a pesticide fails.
Exactly, and a lot of times it is not necessarily resistance, but it's either due to operational factors such as using the wrong material, using the wrong rate, not getting thorough coverage of all plant parts, not spraying frequently enough, and of course a lot of that's on the label that
right.
the people should read before they mix and load. There's also like the pH of the spray solution should be about 5.5 to 6.5. If it's too high, you get alkaline hydrolysis. So there are a number of other factors that can translate into.
And the life cycle of the insect too, I would imagine.
Well, not that, but not all stages are susceptible to pesticides.
Right.
The pupa, there's no spray that kills the pupa, and the material that kills the eggs are like oils. So most of your contact materials are only active on the nymphs, larvae, and the adults.
Okay.
So if you're spraying when 90% of the population is the egg, you're going to get very little mortality, and then you have to come back and spray more frequently.
Okay, all right, which kind of then maybe can cause a problem with resistance later on, right?
And so that's why you need to rotate different modes of action in order to reduce the possibility of resistance developing.
All right, well, thank you so much for sharing all this information
Very welcome.
with us.
Yeah, you're very
Thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.